Hello, everybody. Welcome to Masonic or Not, Secret Stash. My name is AJ.
My name is Keon.
And last episode, you and I had a great discussion about light. And we got to kind of expand on that as Masons. People definitely associate that word with us. What we offer, what we look for, what we value, what we're in constant pursuit of is more light. I feel like we definitely dove into and tapped into both a physical and spiritual meaning, but primarily we were focusing on like vibrations and frequencies and the universe and nature and what light does and its effect on the universe. However, we as Masons, one of the things that we're able to point at, we dove into one episode, the skull. Now, what's under the skull?
The great light in Masonry.
Right. The Holy Bible.
Or any volume of sacred law.
Absolutely. Well, another great point we'll get to. But for us, looking at this skull in the Bible, we talked about the skull being kind of a representation of our individual mortality.
Correct.
Also,
and death in general.
Right. A symbol of realizing that all things in this universe come to an end, or on our journey. Now, with the Bible, I think of this kind of being a yin and a yang, life and death, mortality and immortality.
Okay.
We can go there.
Okay.
So even with the physical, it's also the physical and the spiritual.
Wow.
Which,
Okay.
we are definitely, as Masons, where we wear, the most common symbol, obviously, is the square and compass. We really don't have to ask whether that's Masonic or not, because we we know as a symbol, it most certainly is.
Correct.
Also within the symbol, you can go really deep, but that's also really to us it's light as well, right?
Correct.
The square and compass being light,
Correct.
the Bible being light.
Everything. The power of Freemasonry comes through its symbolism.
Right.
And the whole goal of this podcast is what? To dispel
Disinformation and misinformation.
Yeah, about these symbols. Because at the end of the day, they're just symbols. It's the individual's attitude towards them and also their conscious relationship with them. And it's the same thing with the Bible or any volume of sacred law as well. It's the individual's interpretation of the living story, the living word of God.
Right. And depending on different jurisdictions or different states, whether you can use your book of faith, interchangeable. There is dependent things because we've ourselves seen issues with people using certain books.
Correct.
That we may not have been deemed Masonic, right?
Correct.
Or a book of faith, really. That's how I think it. If you're Hindu or if you're Muslim or if you're that's fine. If you want to use those books, I just don't see the negativity towards the fraternity from that being policy. Another thing I wanted to tap into is there's kind of some misinformation out there about the Bible that we do use. Christians have asked me, I'm a Christian as well, but people have asked me as a Mason, that is it true that we have our own Masonic Bible? And you'll see actually probably out there in print, many Bibles, whether it was your grandfather's or your uncle's or whoever, maybe someone in your family or not, maybe you're in a bookstore, and then you see the square and compass with the G on the Bible, printed on the Bible. Now, as far as like what that means, we do present each candidate with a Bible, and we point that it's up to you to find true meaning
light.
of light within its covers.
Correct.
And I think that's, spiritually, as a Christian, you might have been raised Catholic or whatever denomination, you might have gone to school, Christian school, whatever, and you were taught things. You were literally told the stories. You were going, the story of Jesus, the story of Moses, the Tanakh, which is, the first part of the Bible compared to the New Testament. Whatever it was, you received some kind of education. Whereas for us as Masonry, we do use symbols like King Solomon, right? We use Hiram, even Hiram.
It's a
right?
it's a good point. It's a good point that the mysteries of Freemasonry are actually biblical in nature. It's a
Right.
really good point that you bring up. And yes, King Solomon's temple, also Hiram
right,
as well
right.
within the book.
Whether that's Hiram, king of Tyre,
Yes,
who developed a relationship with
King Solomon.
through David,
Yeah.
originally with David, and they had their own. They developed a trading route, right?
Which eventually turned. But whether it's historical or not, this is
Freemasonry tends to present it as allegory,
correct.
right?
Exactly. And it's,
We don't claim that this is a historically accurate tale that we're telling you.
correct.
However, it's one with many mystical messages
Correct.
from multiple faiths
Yep.
to educate and inspire and enlighten the candidate,
Enlighten.
right?
Correct.
So really, honestly, a Masonic Bible, if you see one, is probably going to have a spot in the front where other members and brothers could have signed for their, a commemoration of their degree. You might see some other notes in discussing King Solomon or Egypt or what was going on historically at the time, some of the reference to the different pagan gods that were present at the time, just as more of a historical footnote on the side for you to kind of do research and understand
Correct.
like the times and the religions and the cultures and the Babylonian periods, and people kind of associate that directly with our views, and it's just not that it's not true.
Right.
When you're looking at the Bible or a Masonic Bible in reference, it's not a rewritten version for our liking.
Correct.
There's definitely not any other.
Well, I think
It's a King James version. Bottom line.
correct. I think a good point to bring up is why did the brothers who formed, well, I'm not going to say who formed Freemasonry, but there was heavy oppression in the 1700s from both church and state, because the church and state were not separate.
Right.
And in order for Freemasonry to do the work that it does and continue to have lived safely under the watchful eye of the church, they needed to have some sort of protection.
Right.
And that protection, which, by the way, what I'm about to say, every holy book, in my opinion, is essentially telling the same story. There's a lot of correspondences between all of them. But being that Freemasonry started in Europe, well, the Freemasonry that we have today, it stems from Europe. There are most certainly other forms of Masonry or mystery schools that have existed long before in places like Egypt and around those areas as well, the Middle East, different kinds of mystery schools. But in Europe, they had to portray themselves as a Christian organization in the beginning in order to escape prosecution or any suspicion from the church. And that is why they took like you said, it's not necessarily historical. It's not 100% accurate. Masonry's version versus what's written in the Holy Bible, but it is certainly inspired from the covers of the Holy Bible.
Exactly. And still, through the degrees, points to the Bible as
Correct.
your rule and guide and
Correct.
our way to come together.
Correct. And mind you, it's any volume of sacred law. And it just depends where you are in the world. And even if you are in the United States, some lodges definitely allow you to swear your oaths upon the book of your choosing. It doesn't matter. I mean, not just any book. You can't just bring in,
Satanic
Can't bring
Bibles
in-
or whatever, you know what I mean? Like,
you can't bring in
seriously.
nursery rhymes.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. You can't bring anything. It's got to be the word of God transcribed within a volume of sacred law, whether you're Jewish, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, even Catholics, right? Even Catholics too. Catholics, yeah. Mormon, anything, literally.
Yeah, and as we discussed with our brother Eugene, even in the Grand Orient of France, supposedly you don't have to have a specific religion.
Yeah.
They claim atheist, but I think more in the sense of
They're different though. They're
Right.
different.
They have their
it's
own
different. Yeah, it's the Grand Orient of France is
total
different from UGLE, United Grand Lodge of England.
in which in a sense our version originally did stem from things from
France.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
they're like really like mystical.
Yes.
They're very heavy into magic and mysticism, and which translates to the sciences of the soul, not necessarily some woo-woo,
Yeah.
weird stuff out there. Just they were, for some reason, the French are they've been very curious about the science of the soul. What is an individual's relation to the infinite, the rest of the world?
Absolutely. And then I like you said, they were escaping during the time, medieval times, like even with the Knights Templar, the Brotherhood they were escaping religious persecution.
Correct.
And it wasn't from, the religion itself. It was the king.
Correct.
It was the Pope.
Nobody wanted, and it's kind of interesting too, man, bringing this up. They didn't want free thinkers,
No.
which literally are what Freemasons aspire to be, are free thinkers and free doers, essentially. And
Absolutely.
they had to play it smart. They had to play it safe. But ultimately, the allegory is from the Bible, but the symbolism comes from way even before 1717. The earliest, like 400 or 500 years before that, in Ireland, there were found in a church, or I forgot, it was stained glass, and the square, the compasses, different symbols of Freemasonry were there.
Absolutely.
So the allegory is stemmed from the Holy Bible. But the symbols and the symbolism of Freemasonry they stem from antiquity, from time immemorial.
Right.
It's the same thing when you think about it. I'm not saying Freemasonry came from Egypt. They had their own mystery schools.
Right.
But when you think about it,
It's like a collective.
yeah, it's a collective. And in Freemasonry, we take the story which explains the science of the soul, and we explain it through the allegory of King Solomon's temple, which
And the
stems
construction.
from which stems from the Holy Bible.
Right. And also stemming back to even in Christianity or any initiatic organization,
Correct.
kind of like you said, mystery school or kind of like a culturally driven religion that's ancient, right? Now, when I think of light, okay, in the Bible, we're talking about pointing to the light. It's very much not a physical sense, right?
Correct.
We're definitely using it as a symbol for spirituality.
Correct.
And I think tale as old as time, nothing new under the sun, the world and its inhabitants are full of people who are deep and shallow, people who are living spiritual and non-spiritual lives.
Correct.
People who are stuck in what people call a life of sin or stuck in their negative ways. And there are people who are living, I believe, a higher frequency of spirituality and of a much fuller life that is abundant with love.
Yes.
And I think that that's the essential of when you have achieved light, when you're gaining light, when we have this burning candle every episode, symbolically, that's if you wake up in the morning and spirituality, spiritual things, spiritual fruit, rewards, spiritual building, improvement is not at the forefront of your consciousness, that you're going to start kind of falling back into living a non-spiritual life, a physical life, being kind of stuck down here in this material world because you're caught up.
Right.
You're stressed out, you're overwhelmed. And that's okay. Like life is in itself, I think, a test of can you handle the many obstacles it throws at you?
Correct.
And that could be
Can
money.
you handle the death
Yeah.
before?
And even we can go on a deeper level, even in the covers of the Bible, those who may have not have studied the Bible or read the Bible, maybe you have, there's a need to find yourself in God, right? There's a need to be initiated. There's a need to have that moment of self-discovery of who you are and who you are in God. And the knowledge, right, of having that you are made in the image of the Creator is a very powerful initiation and awakening of yourself, of your
Huge.
soul, right?
Huge. Because huge.
Yeah, because the moment you realize that you're a descendant of the Most High, that you have a royal bloodline, that you are called to live a higher existence that's full of what God intended.
Correct. That, in my opinion, that releases, and that's on like a personal note, that's with my like artistry and my music, that's what I'm trying to get people to realize.
Right.
Because you might not get enlightened by the fact, but it does open you up to greater possibilities of the magic and mystery of life.
Right.
Instead of just thinking you are a mortal that is independent from this machinery we call the universe,
Right.
or God, or source, or spirit, or any denomination of something that is bigger and greater.
Yeah, the
than us.
the source of where we're from. And also, I think about so we're now being initiated right into our self-discovery. You kind of have to show that you have some like to be passed, right? In the Bible, you need to kind of like even in Catholicism, they kind of use it as almost like their confirmation, right? You need to show that you have. There's either something to recite, there's a prayer, or even in the Jewish faith, The bar mitzvah, they do a reading of the Torah. They kind of show that they're proficient in understanding this knowledge, right?
Right.
And of course, I think as a whole, and this is totally from a Christian perspective, as a whole, whether that it is definitely pointed to in the Old Testament, but at the Old and the New Testament combined, the main point is understanding the spiritual death of the Christ, the physical death, and the raising, and what that meant for us, and what that meant for Christians or people who accepted this spiritual gift from the Father, right, or the Creator, that by this sacrifice, by this death, by this blood, you're born and made new. Now, of course,
that's like we're connecting everything. I hope if you're following along, we are connecting everything. So refer back to literally the last 2 episodes. Okay, continue.
Yeah, no, and just the state of knowing that the old you needs to die. You need to shed your skin. You know, once you've kind of come into the realization that you were living like an animal, or that you were living in the physical, that you were kind of stuck in some of the nature's ways. Because not everything in nature is good. Not everything in nature is fair, right? We have a separation. We are part of nature, but there is something that separates us from nature, and that is our consciousness.
Right. Nature, I will say though, nature has an intelligence.
Oh, absolutely.
And nature, when we say nature too, it's not like the forest. We were talking about nature as in the laws and principles that govern the universe.
Right.
We are not separate. What makes us separate is our consciousness.
Right.
But we may choose to flow and be in harmony with the forces of evolution, or fall from grace.
Right. Absolutely.
And so I was going to ask you, what is it? And for you guys that are tuning in, the spiritual path, what are we becoming? What are we being liberated of? And like you mentioned it, but
I think our sinful nature.
okay.
And I don't believe that, and this is once again my personal belief. I don't want to speak on anyone's behalf, but when we are born, at first we're innocent, right? We're the little baby, and there's no argument that. But at some point, we come to the realization of right and wrong, and good and bad, and what we should and what we shouldn't do.
Right.
And I think Freemasonry more points to the point of you now have entered into a realm of thinking and living that you're no longer a slave to your physical,
to your upbringing, your past conditioning.
Your spiritual man has now conquered your physical. And just being
as
aware.
As a Master Mason, by the way.
Absolutely. And just being aware that, like, we are physical creatures. We are physical beings, but we're also spiritual creatures. We're also spiritual beings. And it's an important thing to realize that what you're really here for is to find the balance.
Correct.
God knows our hearts. He knows your intentions. He knows your mind. You can't.
All-seeing eye.
All-seeing eye.
See what we're doing here? Connecting all the shit.
You can't.
Sorry. Connecting all the stuff.
Your heart, you're saying your other question, just to add on to your ultimate question of, the point is to become like God. That's what we're doing.
Okay.
Because He
I like that.
is wonderful and amazing and love and light without us.
He, she, it.
But, right.
Yeah.
Okay. But God, the grand architect of the universe, clearly designed this because He wanted communion.
Correct.
He wanted to live in us.
Correct.
He wanted us to be Solomon's temple so that His spirit could come reside. so that our prayers could be like incense of offering that we lift up into the heavens, so that he can come down and be with us, as above, so below.
There you go.
To me, that's true light.
Right.
It's not materialistic. It's not wealth. You can't replace it. You could search your whole life wandering this earth, and you're going to miss, because you're looking for some physical thing.
Right.
When you're going to miss the true Holy Grail, the true salvation, the true light,
which are found within the covers of any volume of sacred law, which we as Freemasons look to find more light, additional light.
Here, here. Well, we hope you enjoyed this special edition.
Secret Stash.
Masonic
That's cool.
Secret
We're
Stash.
building that's kind of cool.
It's discovery. Discovery of our own interpretation of some of the mysteries of life. Not just of Freemasonry, but of life. We all face these questions. We all are smacked in the face.
Amen.
With death and life. And the mortality of the flesh and the immortality of the soul.
So mote it be. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, comment. Let us know what you think. What other comments, what other topics that you guys want us to cover as well. And we will see you next time.
Peace and love.